A general overview of Confucianism by me, Shar Khazim Butt.
And me, Alexander McCollum.
Okay, so what is Confucianism? It is a philosophical ideology that has 6 million followers. Its goal is to create a more harmonious and sound society. It's a philosophy for some and a religion for others. The central ideology is to create a moral compass to choose right from wrong without having authoritative rules to dictate so. It's a mixture of Chinese folk religion, Buddhism, and Taoism. Who founded it? Well, the man behind Confucianism is based off Kung Fu Ji, also known as Confucius himself, hence Confucianism. A renowned philosopher and an educator. He lived from 551 BC to 478 BC in China. Origins. Where did it all begin? Well, it started in China. And since Confucianism has spread throughout East Asia from places like Vietnam, Japan, Korea, and mostly, just around these parts, some parts of Taiwan, began roughly around the 6th century BC in China, and yet to this day recruits many followers. Key beliefs. Well, the main principle of Confucianism is Ren, or benevolence. It signifies good character in accordance with Li, or propriety, Zhong, or loyalty, true to one's nature, and Shu and Zhao. The key principle is to be altruistic, meaning selfless, giving to others, not wanting anything in return, and to showcase good character and moral value. Now, the state of being, Li, Zhong, Shu, Zhao, as aforementioned. Confucius's 5 human relationships that should be governed by Li, or propriety, are, for example, ruler-subject, father-son, husband and wife, the oldest son to the youngest brothers, elders and youngsters. These are just very sacred relationships, and they should have, a very understanding bond, something of very true to nature and very respectful thing, because it's a very beautiful bond. The 5 constant virtues, further explained, just so we can explain them a little more. Ren, the virtue of benevolence, charity, and humanity. Yi, honesty, uprightness. Zhang, doing one's best. Shu, being considerate of others. Li, having good manners, being polite, in ceremony or worship. These are just basic things every good human being should have, and this is what Confucianism teaches. It's not a religion, but it's a set of principles that all comes together to make a person a good moral being.
And it can be a religion for some.
Absolutely. Key beliefs continued. Just some examples of Shu. The benevolence in rulers, the loyalty within ministers, subjects, the relationship of the kindness within the father and the devotion of the son, the righteous husband and the obedient wife, the calmness in the oldest of sons, and humility and respect amongst the youngsters, respect for the elders, especially for your ancestors, and deference for youngsters. The main aspect or the main key is to respect and be obedient to teachers and elders. And this religion mainly focuses around the principles rather than the set of rules. It teaches, it doesn't impose.
It really harps on the roles each individual has within society. Benevolence in rulers, be good to your subjects, and ministers, be loyal to, the ruler. And then subsequently your subjects. It's establishing these pathways of order, kindness in the father and devotion of the son. It's kind of like, if the father is going to be kind, then the son should be devoted to the kind father. And why wouldn't a son be devoted to a father who's kind? It's a logical set of values. And the same thing with a righteous husband and obedient wife, a wife in ancient Chinese society, especially imperial China, if your husband was righteous, you would want to be obedient so that you could go throughout that society in a progressive manner, in an orderly fashion, right? If your husband is righteous and you're obedient to him, you're helping to further the household's values. And this is what all of these different key beliefs really harp on, is each individual's place within a society.
Absolutely. Now, moving on, we're going to talk about some sacred texts. Now, the most sacred scripture in Confucianism is the Lan Yu, the Analects. The Lan Yu are primarily based off the sayings of Confucius, just sayings. The 5 classics, which are Li Xing, classic of rights, Yi Xing, the classic of changes, Shan Xing, spring and autumn annals, Shai Xing, classic of odes, and the Shu Xing, the classic of history. Alongside that, there's also 4 books: Lan Yu, Analects of Confucius; Shangyang, the Doctrine of Mean; Ta Xu, the Great Learning; and Mengju, Mencius, a Confucian philosopher. Li Xing, the classic of rights. The classic of rights basically outlines moral principles in relation to royal regulations and the development of ritual objects, sacrifices, music, scholarly behaviors, educations, and things like, justice, rights, and doctrine of the mean Zhongyang. Zhu Xi was a Neo-Confucian philosopher back in 1190 CE. Renamed one of the 2 chapters in the Classic of Rights, Shi Shu, 4 books, and published them in tandem with 2 other Confucian texts. He's actually a very significant person because he was a Neo-Confucian philosopher. We need to remember that. He introduced Chinese students to Confucian literature. And a lot of that has to do with why a lot of Confucianism is spread out, because he was a teacher, an educator. And this in hand, he had a lot of students, and he just spread the culture. Yi Xing, classic of changes. Yi Xing is an amalgamation of a series of insightful vision and calculated technique. It talks about the cosmos and it being a byproduct of a great transformation that, like hand in hand harmony, just like between yin and yang, the 2 main forces, qi. The result is a rich, filled, yet dynamic world of a plethora of organisms of different categories and diversities that all in all balance each other out. This in essence circumvates into an ideal of unity between man and heaven through liberated self-effort. Shanqing, autumn and spring annals. There's a historical vision presented in the spring and autumn annals that emphasizes the importance of collective memory for communal sense identification. With regard to Confucianism, historical awareness is a defining thought. Confucius himself defined as a lover of antiquity and a transmitter of its core values. He emphasized that these were necessary for self-knowledge. He believed in an ancient principle native to Sinitic wisdom that reanimating the old is the best way to attain the new.
So he was very, very focused in history and what came before us and is not here today, because he really he saw the value in orders that were established beforehand, orders that may have been lost, and he cataloged and understood this process of order than disorder, order than disorder. And so in order to create order, Confucius understood that you must learn from the past, you must look at past failures and past successes and go from that.
Absolutely. Shishing, or the classic of odes, classic of poetry, basically serves to present that it was created by Confucius and cited by him as an example, an expression of literacy and was expressed as
Expression of literary value.
literary value, yes, and it was expresses of pleasure without being licentious, and of grief without being hurtfully excessive, just bringing a balance, of opposing powers. It contains 305 poems, 6 poem titles classified as ballads, popular songs, courtly songs, or eulogies. There were 4 versions, however, we need to keep in mind that only one survived a book burning in 2013 BCE. Incredible.
213.
213 BCE. Shushing, classic of history. Shushing is a given series of documented records that go back to the ancient history of China. Though it has been known to might have been fabricated, its oldest constitutes are legitimized. What this means is that out of the 58 chapters, 33 are considered modern script and known to be authentic or legit, and the works of 4th century BC and earlier. That's how far they date back to. The beginning 5 chapters serve to pose the sayings and doings of emperors, great emperors such as Shan and Yao, who reigned during the prime ages, the golden ages of China.
And these are some of the histories that Confucius harps on to understand. There was order in the old empires, and once the old empires collapsed, there was this disorder. There was feudal disarray within China, lack of progress, and a lot of war and disagreements between communities and villages. And so Confucius sought to end all this through bringing history to the forefront, explaining to the population what does create order, what is the basis of good relationships. And these are all they all have a foundation in the history. This is what was successful. This is what was unsuccessful. This is what created a healthy communication, a healthy relationship with regard to communication, with regard to commerce, and many other things.
Parts of the world dominated by Confucianism. Basically, as you can see, blue is Confucianism, and this takes more on China, East Asia. Although there are other parts dominantly, Confucianism was in China. Where and how? Confucianism originated in China, spread throughout most of East Asia, places like Japan primarily, and it made its way to, islands like Taiwan, Korea. It is spread through means of volunteering and kindness instead of taking over and forcing it upon the mass populace. They wanted to educate people. They wanted to spread it. They wanted peace and knowledge. They wanted to show people that it was their decision to take upon Confucianism. They wanted to be enlightened. And instead of, as we've seen past in history, people try forcing their religions, cultures, and sanctions upon other populaces, and it ends in mass destruction, bloodshed, and a lot of pain and despair.
And so Confucius teachers really focused on being teachers to the population, going in and illustrating concepts and ideas and ways to communicate and respect each other. It was kind of a take it or leave it. I'm not saying you absolutely must do this, but here's a really good idea. Here's what's worked in our society. Here's what's allowed us to gain progress and achieve a higher order. And people kind of took to it when they saw value in it. It wasn't something that was forced down people's throats. That's what, the way Confucianism spread in Korea was through Chinese influence. And this was primarily because the teachers didn't have to go against rulers who didn't want them in their territory. Since China had such influence over Korea, they could freely go throughout Korea and preach and teach about these Confucian values, versus other localities like Vietnam and other parts of East Asia that were controlled by other rulers. It was harder for the teachers to go and teach when the political control was so much and was different than what the Chinese imperial dynasty was trying to do.
Common terms of Confucianism, Taoism, a religion native to China. Its founding attempt, to live according to Tao, or the way which they believe governs the universe. Taoism, philosophical system developed by Lao Tzu and Shuangzi, advocating a simple, honest life and non-interference with the course of natural events. Yin Yang, two principles of Chinese religion, one negative, dark and feminine, and one positive, bright and masculine, the Yang. Interactions with these influence the destinies of living things. We know about yin and yang, the up and down, the left and right, the peanut butter to the jelly. It all comes together, and there's opposite forces that counteract and balance each other out. The five classics, as aforementioned, are described in terms of the five visions: metaphysical, political, poetic, social, and historical. And lastly, the five elements, earthly elements, cyclical movements: wood, fire, earth, water, metal. This list was composed to explain all things that come together in harmony. Let my partner take over.
So here are some more common terms of Confucianism. Zen refers to keeping one's word and being faithful, one of the five constant virtues. Yi, important in Confucianism, it means justice and righteousness. Zhu means wisdom. It's believed that wisdom didn't just concern the person's ability and aptitude, but also his moral cultivation. Jin, another word for humaneness in Confucianism. Chung means loyalty to the state. Sao, filial piety, which is considered very important in this religion or philosophy. It is the primary duty of respect and obedience and to care for one's elderly relation. It also means love within the family. So we can see all of these terms are related to personal behaviors, how you should act within yourself and how you should act with others. When we're talking about Yi, for instance, justice and righteousness, I should always be looking for fairness, and not just fairness, but a righteous fairness. I want to do this because I am good, because this is good, because this will be for the good of society. It's a righteous goal. These very complicated terms within Confucianism. When we're looking at Sheng, for instance, it says to be loyal to the state, but this just doesn't mean being loyal to the state. In today's idea, this means being loyal to the community, being loyal to any entity which you are a part of, that you are a part of fostering and growing, and
a common norm, if
right,
you will,
where you share common values. And this is the world at large as well, from community to community. And Jen, being humane with each other, you could almost say doing unto others as you would have done unto yourself. These simple concepts are necessary to create an orderly and productive society. Concerning the five elements, water, fire, wood, earth, and metal, they each correspond with colors: red,